Very tough situation. Thank you, Chris. Because of COVID, many families are hoping to move their things still together recovering. CBS Lonnie Quinn is tracking the holiday. Lonnie, I hope you understand. Lonnie, thank you. Tonight, President-elect Biden says he wants to move quickly in working with the White House on getting a vaccine to the public. Now, that comes less than 24 hours after the Trump administration gave the green light for the transition to move ahead. Here's CBS's flexing diplomatic muscle, President-elect Joe Biden introduced the 6 socially distanced members of his foreign policy and national security teams. And Mr. Biden put Melody up to speed on intelligence matters as President Trump finally signed off on sharing the presidential daily brief. The president-elect's national security team includes the first Latino nominee for Homeland Security Secretary, the first woman to lead the intelligence community, and the first private envoy to have a seat on the National Security Council, former Secretary of State John Kerry, who vowed to join Paris Climate. Nominees a swift hearing, but some Republicans are already now. On Twitter, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton described Biden's commitment and the hunters who will only reinforce his instincts to go soft on China. Senator Marco Rubio criticized their high background, citing no orderly caretakers of a perfect farm. After the GSA approved a global transition, Mr. Biden is in touch with all federal agencies and Dr. Anthony Fauci. Tonight, President-elect Biden told reporters he hasn't gotten intelligence briefings yet, but expects to start them on a regular basis, and he said he would be willing to meet with President Trump if he asked. Margaret? Nicole Conan, thank you. Today, Nevada and Pennsylvania certified President-elect Biden as winner in those states 3 weeks after polls took a lead. President Trump still insists he will never concede, but behind the scenes states are now cooperating in the transition. Here's Stephanie Bentry.
President Trump making a sudden, strange appearance in the briefing room today to brag about the stock market. Stock market just broken 30,000. That was that number. The secret was walking out after just 64 seconds. Again, refusing to take any questions. The stock market is soaring on news that an official transition to President-elect Joe Biden is underway. Many expected to nominate former Fed Chief Janet Yellen for Treasury Secretary. President Trump's pre-election predictions wrong. They got in, they would go out. Democrats, the likes of which you've never seen before. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada have now certified their elections for Biden. The General Services Administration triggered the transition, but President Trump is still refusing to concede. The president's top lawyers and chief of staff Mark Meadows led the transition team in. Staff and per transition protocol, they are now permitted to speak directly with Biden's transition team unless authorized. And President Trump today issuing his first pardon since losing the election. Are they very, very fortunate? Named noticeably did not repeat what he said about a turkey named Carrots in 2018. This was a fair election. Unfortunately, Carrots refused to concede and demanded a recount, and we're still fighting with Carrots. The Trump campaign keeps fighting despite no real path to victory. The recounts that it's demanded in Georgia and Wisconsin are now underway, but even if by some miracle the results in those states are overturned, it is still not enough for President Trump to get the election.
Thank you very much, Ben Tracy. Today, Purdue Pharma pleaded guilty to criminal charges stemming from its role in the opioid crisis. The maker of Oxycontin admitted to defrauding regulators and paying illegal kickbacks to doctors. Purdue agreed to pay up to $8.3 billion in settlement with the Justice Department. Opioid overdoses have contributed to almost 500,000.
Jen, I think you're going to have to, since I can't see everybody, you're going to have to tell me if we've got a quorum at 6 and if Jerry and Kent are with us.
Okay, I mean, I was just putting this on there until everybody got on, but
Sure.
I can take it off until it's time too, if you'd rather.
Well, yeah, it'll help me kind of keep tabs on who's here, who's not. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it. I'm glad you're prepared.
Yeah, I just wanted to test it out to make sure I could do it.
Good job. Good job.
Thank
Hmm. And we lost Keith. Okay. What is that? You got Charlie McCarthy with you tonight. You know, that doesn't mean you get 2 votes.
I really need to start adding less to cart and more to savings.
Sitting on this couch so long, it made me want to make a choice.
Yeah. And this is the thing, how do you do it all? Our people are dedicated to turning in. In Mexico, charged in connection with the killing of 9 members of a Mormon family with dual U.S. Mexican citizenship.
While we're waiting, Kent, did Alyssa get the information she needed about those businesses?
I had an initial, yes, she did. And I don't know if I gave her an immediate reply and then I was just confirming, and I think I got that, and I think I sent that to Alyssa. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Right here on CBS. Deli owner who can't bear to see anyone go hungry for the holidays.
Hey, Keith, what do you have going in the background?
Oh, probably the TV's on. I'll turn it
Okay.
off.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Hello, everybody.
Hi there, Tim. How's it going in your world?
Oh, it's going pretty good.
Good.
Got quite a bit of snow last night.
Mm-hmm.
How much did you guys get up there?
I think there was about probably 7 inches on my deck.
That's what I'm guessing. It was a little more compressed as it continued to fall because it was warmer, but
Yeah.
I think we had about 5.5, 6 here in Denver.
uh-huh.
Just so you guys know, we are going to have both judges on the call,
Okay, good.
and I'll promote them when it's time.
Okay,
So
great.
we have a couple people from short that are going to be on the call regarding the short-term rentals, and I have told them that it's up to the board for discussion first, and then if they want to take public comment, we will, but told them that the second reading is when the public hearing is and all that, but
Okay,
just so you know.
wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Mary.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. How are you feeling, Kent? You're okay? You've lost your voice.
I'm okay. Not great. And I apologize ahead of time for the coughing that will occur
Okay.
when I answer, but
So we can all say COVID, COVID.
yeah. But I don't think it's transmittable through Zoom, you know. At least
Good.
they haven't proven
Well,
it yet. So
I hope you come back negative.
You too.
God, I just saw Keith's.
Yes. His friend.
It's the only friend I've got.
I can understand why.
I wish Norm would lose her voice.
No, you don't.
I'll be right back.
All righty.
I'm missing something.
As a psychologist, I think you're just doing that deliberately because you know of the aversions to it.
Just trying to draw attention to himself.
Just lightening the mood.
So is there a way when we tune in or start meetings like this, and I've seen this happen with the county and everything too, where we come in early like this and it's on record and we're live, but it isn't 6 o'clock yet, we haven't started our meeting. I mean, with the exception of bringing in a clock in the background of somebody's picture, which is silly. Is there a way technologically that we can actually show real time? Does anyone have any experience with that with the Zoom or Facebook Live? Because honestly, it's kind of annoying when you try to come in and you're like, my God, the meeting's like 3 hours. No, because they've been on for an hour, and then you fast forward, and
Yeah.
it would just be nice to start at the right time.
I'm using the time on my computer here, and right now it says 5:57. So I don't know if Zoom has a clock feature or not.
But we
Yeah.
are streaming live right now. I mean, if that's your question,
No,
Well,
on the website.
partly because obviously if we haven't technically started yet, but if someone who looks at it later or someone just comes on, they see the time and they realize that they haven't actually missed. It's really more, I think, when we review the meetings. I don't know.
okay.
I have too much time on my hands. No, it's, what can I say?
I'm back.
We missed you.
And John's here too. Very good. We are up to 4, so the quorum has been reached.
Dummy's here too.
Nice wooden head, Keith.
It's the only one with a brain in it.
I'll attest to that.
Yeah.
Hi there, Jerry.
Kind of neat. It almost looks like there's a ghost in Paul's background, you know, through the doors. If you look at his,
Ah, mm-hmm.
I guess it was the reflection.
Okay, my clock says 6 straight up, so, and we've got 5 out of the 6 selectmen, so I think we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Georgetown Board of Selectmen, and it is November 24th, 2020. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
Allegiance to
to the United States
of the United States of America
the Republic,
and
for
to
which
the
it
republic
and
stand
one nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
okay. Next is roll call. I am Lynette Kelsey, police judge. Rob Connell is not here tonight. Keith Holmes,
Here.
John Jennings,
Here.
Paul Hingen,
Here.
Mary Smith,
Here,
Tim Allen.
Here,
Thank you. We have a quorum. Agenda approval. Does anybody have anything they wanted to add to the agenda, take off?
I'd like to add a few things.
Okay,
Under staff items, can we add some conversation about tree lighting? Some conversation about snow plowing? Perhaps just a quick touch on the Christmas market weekends that aren't. And I think the rest of my stuff falls under what we've already got done.
okay. Anyone else have anything to add? Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Audience business. Members of the audience have 5 minutes to present any matter of interest not already on the agenda. Jennifer, do you know if we have anybody here for audience business?
I do not have anybody that has said so.
Okay. We can wait a moment if we Okay, seeing none, we will move on. The payables that we have before us tonight are from November 6th through, there's on the agenda, the date is not correct. The payables we have are from November 6th through November 19th, 2020.
About that.
Anybody have any questions or comments on any of the payables?
I don't.
I'm good.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the payables as presented?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the payables from November 6th, 2020 to November 19th, 2020.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the payables from November 6th through November 19th, 2020 as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes that we have to review and approve are from our meeting of, November 10th. That's another date in the agenda that's not correct. I didn't catch that. So November 10, 2020 was our regular meeting. 10. Anybody have any comments, corrections, questions?
I guess the only thing I saw was on approval of payables, it was Connell and Connell, first and second.
Sorry about that here. I can look at my notes real quick and see.
Not a big
Thanks
deal.
for catching that. Thank
That's the
you.
only thing I saw.
Under audience business, there may be a typo on the second line. It says Cohen believed that most pet stores.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, yes.
Did we have, when she introduced herself, Jennifer, didn't she indicate that she was from some organization or, I thought there
I
was
don't
some
know.
connection other than just a concerned citizen that she
I
was.
mean, she did tell me when she called that she has been addressing a lot of towns, and so she has been trying to do this with other towns and has been successful. But I don't know if she's. I'm looking for my notes. I can look that up for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got the impression that she was with an organization, so. Okay, and then I had just one correction in the presentation by Amy Saxton. Just reword the last sentence in that section a little bit. So maybe insert the word be in front of the word designate and then add a D on the end of the word designate, just so it reads better.
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay. Anything else? Do you want us to wait for you to find your notes, Jen?
No, you can go ahead. I will. I can't find them right at this moment.
Okay. All right.
If you want to approve them with the
Corrections.
insertion of the correct, the lady that was with a certain organization, I can add in that organization later.
And then correct
like.
who made the motion and who seconded on the payables,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other correction. So would anybody like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the regular meeting minutes with corrections noted.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the November 10th, 2020 regular meeting with the corrections noted and discussed. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. First on our new and unfinished business agenda is our budget for 2021. Consideration of adoption. This is a public hearing. And I'll go ahead and call the public hearing to order. It is 6:10, I believe, p.m. Kent or Mary, you wanna intro?
Sure. Over the last couple months, Police Judge Kelsey and members of the board, you've been working on this budget. What's presented before you or presented in your packets is where we ended up. The theme for this budget basically is if and we're still dealing with if ands as we go along. The town continues to see a steady revenue stream during this year, which was kind of surprising with the complete shutdown that occurred in March, last half of March and April. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've also had a recent return of that the state health department notified Clear Creek County that they moved the COVID dial to level red, stay at home, and it will cause some difficulties for some of our restaurants and other businesses in town for the next 30 days as of right now. So this budget is still conservative in its revenue estimates because it's hard for us. We have just as many reasons to think that we'll have an increase in sales tax revenues, or we could have a decrease in sales tax revenues in a very short time period. So we kept it flat. That's probably the biggest thing within this budget. We kept the sales tax revenues flat. And then we do have some expenditures that can be held back if necessary if we would have a sudden decrease in revenues. Staff will maintain oversight and to match project priorities with revenue that's actually received. And we do have flowing over for the last 2 years, we've been really focused on the Gateway Improvement Project. We've saved monies in the annual road improvement project in order to pay for anything that came up in the Gateway Improvement Project. But we've left those in place and they've actually rolled over into this budget for 2021. So it's a bigger than normal road improvement project of over $500,000 is what is budgeted for 2021. But in addition to that, the board has agreed with staff on a couple different things. That the expenditure increases include an additional 4th officer for the police department and a report management system upgrade for the entire police department. There's also an additional seasonal employee in the parks department. And we put off the presentation of the parks master plan, but that will give you an idea when we do that at the next meeting. That of all the things that maintain all the parks that we do have in town. The other things, there's not too many other surprising things within this. We did have a couple specific things in sales tax capital improvement that will come to fruition only if there's grant money that it is a match for, and that specifically is repairing the foundation on the town hall. We did include an amount set aside for bridges or to repair the bridge rails on the 22nd Street Bridge, which has been asked for by CIRSA, our insurance agency. There's also an amount set aside to install some bollards in downtown in order to use that type of item to block off the street instead of the pedestrian rails that we do have currently. But that's all included within the sales tax capital improvement fund. The general fund revenues as a whole, and I'm just reading off my initial message here towards the end. The general fund revenues as a whole are projected at a 7% decrease over 2020 because of the input of the flat sales tax revenues and the decrease in licenses and permits. That's mainly building permits. The large building permits for the apartment buildings going up at Bighorn are, they will not be repeated in 2021. And the property reappraisal will occur next year. So the property valuation is a little bit more than the last year, but not a huge amount more. There was one other thing that I wanted to mention. There's also a grant match for the Gateway Trail on the west side of Argentine. If that were to happen, there would be a grant match. But if that grant match doesn't occur, there will not be that expenditure. And then the water and sewer operating funds will stay mainly the same. There isn't a big project this year for those type of like we've had in the last couple years within the water and sewer funds. Probably the biggest thing is possibly adding a fire hydrant and a connection at the helipad location across from Bighorn. But other than that, we've gone through this in detail over the last 4 meetings. And if there's any specific questions, I would either myself or Town Treasurer Mary Sims will be able to answer those at this time.
I'll go ahead and kick things off. I did already talk to both you, Kent, and Mary about this. On the expense summary pie chart, I just wanted the dispatch fees to be included under the fire authority payments. I don't really think it needs its own category because it would be such a tiny sliver. It would hardly even, well, yeah, we could do it as a separate sliver or just list the 2 items together because they're in the one fund, but it is a substantial expense item and it's going to increase as years go on. So I just wanted to be sure it continued to get mentioned. I've gone over a few edits for some of the narrative with Kent. But other than that, I think this is a very well prepared budget. It's very detailed. And thank you very much, Kent and Mary, for putting so much hard work into it. It made our jobs easier. Mary, I did notice that the mills on the certification on the back page of the budget is, you've got it listed as 9.36, but in the general fund, you've got it as that's what it was in 2020, and the narrative says it's going to be 9.38 mils in 20.
Okay. I'm checking, hold on one second. I know we were recouping, some money that we were unable to collect this year. And that's probably the change. I'm sorry. As of right now, no, I don't have the final yet. I won't have that probably till the week after Thanksgiving.
Okay,
But it should be at 9.38 because we have refunds and abatements, which we can collect on this in 2021 for which were refunded or abated in 2020.
okay.
So that's the difference.
Okay, so on the certification sheet that's on the very back page of our budget packet.
It's at 0.38.
No, it says levy 9.36.
Down at where it's total.
Oh, I see down here. Got it. I didn't do the addition. Okay.
No, that's fine.
You're good. Good.
And that's subject to change until I get that final certification from the county.
Sure. Okie dokie. That explains it. The other thing that I wanted, there was some discussion, and the in wages and salaries, the COLA increase was presented to us as this is what we hope to be able to cover. It's possible we won't be able to cover it. I just wanted to know roughly how much money that represented if we were not able to cover it. And Mary said she'd pulled together a quick figure.
I did come up with it's approximately 23,600 for everyone.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I just wanted to see what it would be if we had to make cuts further down the road. I think it's important to figure it into the budget. I think everybody has worked really, really hard. Our staff does, and I think it's good for morale, and we can't do large increases, but that at least helps keep pace, and it hopefully will allow us to hang on to valuable people. And so I just wanted to know what that would amount to. Okay. I think that's all I had. Well, I did have some questions about the municipal courts expense line items because of the letter that Richard Toussaint sent to us. But if anybody has other questions first, maybe we.
And Lynette, just so you know, Richard and Tom Elliott are in the meeting as attendees, and I can promote them to panelists if you'd like. I'll do that.
Okay. Board, should we go ahead and discuss that right away?
Or go ahead after your discussion, sorry.
Okay. Does the board have any other items they wanted to discuss?
I didn't find anything I needed to bring up.
Okay.
I was good.
Okay.
So as far as salaries go, are we about to get, I know that we were behind the 8 ball for a while with regard to our wage amounts in comparable areas with other smaller municipalities. Are we getting caught up now?
We haven't done a had a comparison come across. I don't know, Mary, if you've had that come across your desk lately. I haven't seen one in the last year or two regarding.
I have not had an update probably in the last 9 months anyway. But we can check other comparable small municipalities in the mountains and see. I think we're pretty close to being within line. Not maybe average, but on the low end anyway.
The other thing I would add to that is that there are a lot of jurisdictions, I know Idaho Springs and the county in particular, are not going to do a COLA increase for next year. So I think that puts us a little bit ahead of the game.
How did we come up with a 3% amount?
That's what it's been as long as I remember.
Well, I know, but if you look at CPIU, October to October, October 19th to October 20, it's 1.2%. I'm not knocking the 3%, but yeah, I'd like to see how it was justified. And I do understand that CPI and CPIU in particular are kind of weirdly skewed at this point because of the pandemic. But
Well, and I would make one comment that housing costs in Clear Creek County are not equal to the statewide average.
no, that's true. Housing costs,
housing costs have gone out of sight the last 2 years here. So,
and food costs have gone up exponentially too. And like I said, I'm not arguing.
right.
I just want to have some basis for reality.
And we didn't take it as versus the statewide CPI. So,
right.
But there are some mitigating factors, I think, within Clear Creek County. So.
Anything else before we invite Richard Toussaint and Tom Elliott to join us? Okay, Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and promote them, if you would, please?
Okay, and I am doing that. So here they are. So Tom and Richard, you can go ahead and speak when you're ready.
All right, well, I'll start. I know Tom's there somewhere. Police judge and board members, it's nice to see you again. It's been a while, and I think I'm going to establish with Jennifer a time where we can do a state of the court type report annually. The last few years have been crazy, and we've just kind of muddled through, and I've come and asked for money for the attorney program, which we based on how we've held prisoners now, and then with an automatic release on a personal recognizant bond, we have not had to utilize those initial having an attorney at each initial appearance by a prisoner. So we've been able to do a lot of things that have kept us well in compliance with the many changes that I discussed even a couple of years ago when I was with you last, and there've been many more since then, and that doesn't even start the COVID stuff. So, and just for a little history, I've been your judge now since the mid 1990s. And Tom, after he was retired and moved to Georgetown, has been the associate judge, and we work together as a team, and have, both of us just felt like, hey, Georgetown struggling a little bit, and we can not worry about asking for raises and those sorts of things. But with all the changes that have taken place, and as I've put in my letter, and I don't know if all the selectmen did get the letter, because I know I just sent it in last night, but with all the changes that have taken place, we do feel that we're now spending a large amount of time every month working on judicial issues that don't have anything to do with any specific case necessarily, but have to do with what is now expected of municipal courts. And we like our job, but it is becoming more and more of an issue. And just as a history thing, when I took the position in the mid 1990s, I was being paid $250 a month. I asked for that when I took on the higher court, I was able to combine the two together to $200. A couple of years ago, I asked for a raise, and you graciously did give us a raise to $250.
You're starting to have some audio troubles.
Oh, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. I'm just sitting here with my laptop in my lap, so I'll try and talk. But anyhow, so, we have not really raised the cost of the judicial system much since 1995. And, but the role of a municipal judge in Colorado has changed tremendously. And we are just reviewing the kind of time that we each place in the judiciary for Georgetown, and have determined that we need to restructure the scale. I do not consider, just because I'm the presiding judge, that I need to be paid at a higher rate than Tom. That's not appropriate or necessary. But I do think that we both need a base amount because we do work every month. And I also think we need to raise the normal monthly amount to $350 per session. And we will keep in there the $175 per hour for trials and other big projects that come up. But the basic 175, we believe, will take care of most of that, and you probably won't see the add-ons that you've been seeing from both of us for administrative things. If we start getting a lot of trials or a lot of hearings or something like that, that can happen, but that's not a regular occurrence. So I think that kind of gives you an overview of where we're at. I do want to just say that the court is working very well. Bettina is a good addition and a good clerk. And we are able to seamlessly handle cases. Last Friday, and actually last month as well, we both had cases, and we either use the same courtroom or one or both courtrooms in the courthouse. So things are working, and I think your court system is well in line. In fact, may even be a model for small courts in Colorado.
Okay.
Tom,
did
do you want to say something?
Sure. Yeah, I support everything that Richard has said. Certainly this new thing of the 175 a month for each of us, I really do think that's justified. That's 1 hour's work for each of us. Well, I know that I spend a lot more time just, for example, spending time on our listserv, our municipal judges listserv, and reading that. And there's a lot of entries. There's a lot of discussion that occurs on that, good discussion. And that's the way we learn, really. And we contribute, both Richard and I contribute to that. And I just really think that what we're asking for is certainly not out of line. And I'll answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay. I guess the letter was a little bit unclear to me. So do you have court just once a month?
Right.
Is that correct? So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. And so that $350 for court would be for each of you?
No.
Okay.
Whoever has the court.
Okay.
And we
But
take
Normally
turns.
it's Richard.
We do take, and I travel and have other commitments, and oftentimes Tom will fill in for me. So whoever is doing the court date will get that 350 and will bill that amount. The other one will not bill that amount.
okay. So there's $175 for each of you, and then $350 for whoever handles that month's court. And then do you have a feel for, there was another $175 per hour for kind of other things that take your time. And I just, right now we've only got 6,700 for the total year for professional services for the judge in next year's budget. And I was just trying to figure out how much we really need to bump that to. What's the expectation?
That's difficult because it depends. I mean, you could ask Marshall Williams there and ask him how many trials he thinks he's going to get out of all the tickets he writes. It's very difficult to know. It's the trials really that do it. Both Tom and I try and handle all of the motions and all of the other issues that come up before a trial on our arraignment dates. So there aren't a lot of extra hearing dates. We just don't do it. We find ways around it.
Yeah, I never had an extra hearing date.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time. I think we had with some obstreperous lawyers. I think we did once or twice, but it's been a while. And but for the most part, I really think that will be at a minimum, unless, and I have to put one big thing here, is if the legislature does everything that they've talked about doing to municipal courts again, we could end up having to do a lot of administrative work, and that does take time. All those changes that have occurred since 2016, between Tom and I, we've eaten all that time. We just did, and that's fine. We're not complaining, but that in the future, if those big things come in, and we can talk with Kent or you. And come to the thing and says, here's what the legislature is doing to us. It doesn't come, in a nanosecond. We can give you months ahead of time that say this is what it looks like is going to happen and what it's going to mean for us. But one of the things that Tom didn't mention is that we have both, with regard to the Municipal Judge Association, we have both worked on many of the statutes that have come down to try and make them work for rural municipal courts. I mean, we're not Aurora, we're not Denver, and so we have to make these things work and be cost effective for a town, you know, the size of Georgetown, and that's what we're trying to do. So I can't answer your question. I don't think you got to put a big number in there. I really don't. I don't think, I appreciate your questioning us on that, but I think you could maybe do let's say 10 hours. And what that would be is what I'm figuring is, you know, 4 3-hour trials, something like that.
Okay, 4.
Which I know is 12, but I just rounded it down to 10.
Sure.
So yeah.
So the 10 would be times the hourly rate.
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay. Because with the changes for the monthly and for paying both of you, that brought it up to 8,400 without the additional hourly. Yeah, so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. I think it's justified covering what's anticipated, and it's only fair. I just wanted to have the budget reflect what we can without perfect foresight, what we can expect. So.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. So Kenton and Mary can make those changes. All right. Anything else?
Not for me. Tom, you got anything else?
No.
Okay. Appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do we have anyone from the public that wants to make comment at this time, since this is the public hearing? It might be the first time since I've been on the board that we've actually had public comment, if somebody wants to. I'm not seeing anybody. Jen, do you see anybody?
No, I don't see anybody's hand raised or typing in the chat.
Okay, all right. Board, anybody else have anything they want to discuss, bring up, change? Okay. That was a nice thank you from Paul Boat.
I think that if we're going to change the pie chart, I'd like to keep the emergency services stuff in a separate line from the
Okay.
fire.
And add a new sliver for the dispatch?
Yeah, just 2 slivers.
Okay. I'm cool with that. All right. If there's no other comments from either the public or the board, I think we can close this public hearing. It is now 6:43 p.m. And we will have the formal approval of the budget at our next regular meeting. So.
May I just ask for clarification? Changes are
Sure.
just in the municipal court fund, and then on the pie chart for the final.
I believe those are the only two. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda, we have ordinance number 4, series 2020, public hearing, and this is second reading. An ordinance concerning elections and in connection therewith amending section 2.56.030 of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning statutes applicable to conduct of town elections and adopting section 2.56.060 to create a process for addressing complaints alleging campaign finance law violations. We had our first hearing at our last meeting. And Jerry, do you want to take this?
Sure. Everybody can hear me all right?
Yes.
Excellent. Jeff Wilson from our office did the main heavy lifting and drafting this ordinance, and I alerted the board previous to his doing that and first reading that we needed to do this as a result of a statute that the legislature passed, really devolving authority for reviewing and disposing of campaign finance complaints in municipal elections to the municipal clerk. Previous to that time, as I think we told the board, the statutes required the Secretary of State to do that work. The Secretary of State successfully lobbied to move that down to the municipal clerks over a couple-year period, and that took place. So we need to have a process in place for the clerk to rely upon if there is such a complaint. There haven't been municipal campaign finance violation complaints in Georgetown for some time, I believe, which is a credit to the way the elected officials and persons seeking office in Georgetown behave, which is terrific. But it's important to be prepared, and you don't want to have to be adopting requirements after there's been a complaint filed. So I won't take as much time as we spent on first reading because you had Jeff and any questions to be answered. But the ordinance does a couple of things. First, it pulls into the code a couple of statutes that we need to rely upon if we have a recall or if there's an initiative or referendum. And there are procedures in the statutes for handling those kinds of actions that are not in our code, not in the charter. And it's a really good rule book. I use it all the time in other cities when there are initiative, referendum, or recall petitions. And that's very much something you want to have in place before you receive such a petition. So that's done in the early part of the ordinance. The rest of the ordinance is all about municipal campaign finance complaints. There's a process that is set up for that, and persons have to file the complaint with the clerk. There's a process for the clerk to determine it's really not a finance complaint. It's just not within the scope, and to reject it, or for the clerk to say, this is one you can cure. You're 2 days late on the filing of a report, get the report filed and we're good, and we don't have to worry about anything anymore. And I think that winnows out a lot of inadvertent campaign violations, frankly. But if it has actual substance, the clerk then does not make the decision and refers it to a hearing. And there's a hearing officer that's appointed that conducts a little hearing, makes a decision on whether or not there's been a violation, and has the power to impose a civil penalty. Candidates, importantly, are personally responsible for penalties imposed upon their candidate committees. After that, if you're upset with the decision of the hearing officer, you can take that to district court. But it's a pretty clean system. It's more simple than some other cities, but it does give the appropriate detail. If we ever have one of these, it's a nice insurance policy. I hope that it sits in the code and isn't used for many years. But if something happens, you are in good shape. That's the thumbnail sketch of this thing.
Okay. So since this is second hearing, and we need to have a public, second reading, and we need to have a public hearing about it, let me go ahead and open the public hearing. It is 6:46 PM. And do we have anyone from the public who would like to make a comment?
I have not heard of anybody that would like to speak, but if anybody does, they could just type in the chat and I will promote them. Don't see anybody typing or raising their hand or anything, so I'm assuming we don't have any public comment.
All right. Then I will go ahead and close public comment. It is, oh, I might have misread that. I think maybe it was 6:48 because it's 6:49 right now. So, okay. And we will close the public hearing. Anything from the board? Any discussion? Seeing none, would anybody like to make the motion that is a recommended motion is in your packet?
I'll make the motion. I move to approve ordinance number 4, series 2020, an ordinance concerning elections and in connection therewithin, amending section 2.56.030 of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning statutes applicable to the conduct of town elections, and adopting section 2.56.060 to create a process for addressing complaints alleging campaign finance law violations.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 4, series 2020, on second reading. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have ordinance number 5, series 2020. This is a first reading, an ordinance adopting by reference the 2020 model traffic code and providing penalties for the violation thereof and making conforming amendments to the Georgetown Municipal Code. Who would like to kick us off here? Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you. I'll defer to the marshal in a minute, but this is an ordinance you see regularly. The model traffic code gets updated regularly, and the town adopts typically most recent version of the model traffic code. Georgetown's in good shape. There are other towns I'm aware of that are back in the 2015 version, so we are on the cutting edge. When you adopt codes by reference, just like building codes and the other kind of codes you adopt by reference, you're adopting a pretty big book, none of which is in your packet, and instead it refers to the copy of the book you're adopting, in this case, the 2020 model traffic code. And you are required when you adopt codes by reference to adopt in full the penalty sections, and those you see are in the packet, and they track the last time there was a model traffic code adoption. And so it updates it and allows the officers to write tickets against the 2020 model traffic code. I'm sure there'll be a 2021. Maybe we'll skip a year or two, but that's up to the marshal. And happy to answer any questions, but I expect that he may well want to chime in here.
Okay.
Excuse me. I don't even have the COVID. I don't think. As Gerald said, which is obviously why I prefer to speak first to describe what this is about. The updates or the new versions, the model traffic code can go a decade without a new version, or the last version was 2018, which we did adopt through the resolution, just as we are trying for tonight. So whether or not it'll happen again in another year, but there was language and some additional I'm going to call them statutes, even though they're not added to the 2020 version that I wanted to include in relation to other areas that we might need. So it's just to stay up to date. Not much more to add than that.
I'm just a little curious. Can you give us any examples of were there significant changes in particular areas or
There were, I haven't read it over entirely. It's
of course
a
not.
pretty thick book. What we did see was specifics to the new traction laws. And rather than trying to work those past our courts, we will be addressing resolution number 5 or ordinance number 6 in a minute here.
Okay.
And that's going to override what we were looking for, but there's still other areas that I'm certain will be important in there.
Okay.
Beyond that, I can't tell you any.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I just know from my own experience that when a new building code comes out, there's usually a comparison document that kind of points to what changed, what got dropped, what got added. And I didn't know if the model traffic code does the same thing or whether they just leave you to figure it out.
In the state statutes, they absolutely have books like that, and we do specific classes on it. Model traffic code, sometimes we're even surprised that there's a new version out. It's not that well published.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions from the board?
So just so I understand, mainly you're just updating the fines or something, the penalty kind of thing right now, or does it adopt the whole book and you just kind of work through?
It doesn't. We still have a separate resolution for the fines as far as what we call penalty assessments.
Okay.
And we haven't raised our fines for well over 15 years now. I think 2004 was the last time we actually raised our fines. There are times where we think we should consider it. Somewhere someone said we were almost required, but I think because of the status of our charter, we are not required to stay consistent or above the state fines, which we are not. Our fines are actually lower than most of the state fines for a good number of the offenses or violations.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. There is a recommended motion in your packet if anyone would like to make it.
Hey, Keith, make the motion.
I can't find that page. I'm looking for it.
You want to second it?
I'll second it.
I move to approve ordinance number 5, Series 2020, an ordinance amending the Title 10 of the Georgetown Municipal Code, updating to reference the 2020 model traffic code on first reading and post at 3 locations on the town's website.
Just found it.
Better give me a second.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 5, series 2020 on first reading. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And next we move on to ordinance number 6, series 2020. This is also first reading. This is an ordinance amending Title 10 of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning traction control devices required, which Marshall Williams just alluded to. And who would like to do the intro on this one?
And Marshall Williams wants to go first. He's on.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
He's all prepared.
But sure. As far this is an ordinance that mirrors the state traction laws, basically chain laws. We have Georgetown Hill, which is a real problem when people are not compliant. When our commercial vehicles are not compliant, it creates a pretty significant impact on the town. That's part of whether it's on Georgetown Hill or all the way up at the tunnel, somewhere in that range, when they are unable to move further because of their failure to comply with the chain laws. We end up having these problems that we all know about, being the highway closures. Our citizens can't get home. When we're able to accommodate customers and visitors, they can't get here because of public safety concerns. We have to limit how many people can be allowed into town, and that creates a whole nother group of unsatisfied citizens here in town and citizens visiting. So currently, without this ordinance, we will go and still we're enforcing it. State Patrol doesn't always have the personnel to get here in time. Sometimes they even make discretionary decisions or they ignore it. They will try to fix the problem without the punitive factors there. So that's taking a lot of work from us. It puts us in danger being on the highway. And all of those funds, when we will enforce it, would be going to the state. We're looking to make it a municipal ordinance. We're going to have the fines and have them directed to the revenue for the town rather for the state, which can't hurt. I don't consider us trying to build revenue and break any records for revenue generation, but we're using all of our resources. We should be getting the result of that revenue.
Okay. As I was reading it, I wondered, so I assume it applies to all of the I-70 right-of-way that passes through our town limits. Would any other areas be?
It would just be on Interstate 70.
Right, but it's just that portion of it that is from one end of our town to the other. It wouldn't extend any further west or east, would it?
It would not. That's correct.
Okay.
If we did have to deal with that through our interagency agreement with the other agencies, the county and the other cities, we'd write the ticket appropriate, which would be another state ticket or a county ticket.
Okay.
If we happen to be in Silver Plume writing the same offense, we would not be able to write it into our municipal court.
Okay. Would it also be applicable on any of our local streets?
It would not.
Okay.
No, that would be unfair in addition to unenforceable as far as meeting all of the elements. On the
Okay.
highway, there's plenty of signage. The commercial vehicles have their own communications that tell them, yes, it is chain law. And so on the highway, we're allowed to enforce it, but not on the municipal streets or on the city
Okay.
streets.
Would somebody who was in violation of it and got written a ticket from our police department, would they also be subject to a ticket from State Patrol?
I would say not. They wouldn't be allowed to continue until they remedied the problem. And that wouldn't happen. I mean, it's the same as if we stop somebody coming down the hill speeding at 85 and there's a trooper there also. Whoever makes the stop would handle it.
Okay.
We've never had that arise. So.
Okay. Just wondered. Any other? Go ahead.
And I bring this up because not specific to I-70, but it raises the question that coupled with what Lynette had brought up. Do we have the municipal code laws, ordinances that allow us to enforce some type of traction within our community?
For on the city streets
Yes,
is what you're asking? We do
Yes.
not.
and so should we consider something like that that would be in, um, so when the state imposes the chain laws on I-70, similar to the fire ban, when the county ban has the fire bans, or the county has the fire bans going on, we're consistent with the county fire ban. So if the state is implementing chain laws on I-70, we would have traction laws that are in effect, once we've written them, that would apply to operating vehicle in Georgetown.
I understand exactly what you're looking at. In fact, on the last highway closure, we had a number of vehicles, including commercial vehicles that
Yep.
took the frontage road
Exactly.
and created a closure on the frontage road because they were not compliant. But state law is for on Interstate 70 corridor or on the highways. So that would not apply, and we don't have anything in place trying to advertise it and let it be known that it exists so they know what they're violating, out of fairness, and just the logistics of putting it in place would be next to impossible.
Okay, I get that we don't have a law now, and this again is outside the scope of I-70, and I apologize for that, but then why aren't we moving towards having some type of local ordinance written to that effect so that however we need to enforce it down the line, we aren't in that position where not only we're blocking off I-70, but then we're blocking off certain roads within our community.
I would venture to guess that would be groundbreaking in the state, across the state.
Let's break that ground. Come on, Jerry, you
We-
want to
we
write that,
would
don't you?
Involve Gerald Bell for that.
Why not? We're a mountain
well-
community. Why can't we try it? Why can't we look into
At the
that?
same time, it would be groundbreaking. All of the traction laws in place are for the highway corridors. They do not apply to the county roads. So it's,
So if I'm understanding where you're coming from, are you kind of saying like, it's kind of like double dipping? So if the commercial traffic is being put off of I-70 and onto the local road system, that they couldn't be cited for a violation of the traction law on I-70 and then cited for the same
well,
or similar traction law on a local
what
road
we would have
because they
would
have,
be people being funneled into Georgetown by traveling on the county roadways where there are no such rules. And then all of a sudden, they've been funneled into an area where the rule is there, and on no mistake on their part, all of a sudden, how would they know that they weren't allowed to be there without the chains on? So,
okay,
and that would be for every
Okay.
area, municipality, jurisdiction that they travel through. It's,
okay,
I think it wouldn't hold up anywhere in any of the courts. And
Okay.
this is where I defer
I
to
see.
Gerald to explain it more intelligently.
Well, I agree with the Marshall that it is not something that's done elsewhere. The traction law state statute really is directed to state highways that once blocked cause enormous dislocations. I don't disagree that there are some local streets that potentially function in the same way, but not as consistently. And it would, as pointed out, require a separate ordinance just on that subject. And you wouldn't have kind of the cover of the state law. What we're doing here is mirroring largely a state statute to allow us to write that into municipal court, which is permitted. Writing an arrangement for local streets wouldn't have that cover, and I think that would be more difficult. I should mention that we ran this ordinance past the judges. I had a conference call with both judges actually on an earlier draft. They're very helpful. They made good constructive suggestions, which were incorporated into the ordinance. So I'm cautiously optimistic that when tickets are written into municipal court, they'll be good tickets. Judges across the state sometimes have difficulty, municipal judges, with these tickets if they're not, written right or more accurately if the underlying code section isn't what they kind of want to see. And that's why I wanted to make sure that our two judges had seen this, and they were careful to say, look, I'm not going to judge any particular case here, which is the right thing for them to do. But I really appreciated them reviewing it and making suggestions which were incorporated into it.
Okay. The other thing that I noticed was that it appears to really only apply to commercial vehicles and not to private passenger vehicles. And don't the traction laws, the Colorado traction laws, isn't there also a section for private vehicles?
This could have been.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Gerald.
Marshall, I think you're headed in the right direction.
There are passenger traction laws also. It's a different section, a different code. I think we'd be biting off more than we can chew, because the enforcement and the people's awareness of what the traction laws are, those would be down to the range of checking tire depths and what kind of transmissions they have and drivetrains. Those are still available on the highway. With our community, it wouldn't fit. It wouldn't fit.
Okay.
There are many people that drive vehicles that they shouldn't, that's what they can afford here in the community.
Okay.
The other side of this, as far as, I think I lost track of what I was going to say, is what you were coming up with. I thought your question was going to be, but we are still going to dial in the language about more definitively about what commercials qualifies as commercial vehicles. And the only difference that I'm going to approach Gerald about, as far as making it an option, that it can be a penalty assessment rather than a mandatory court appearance, because this will affect our commerce with truck drivers and commercial vehicle operators having to show up in Georgetown on that particular day, where for the most part with the chain law tickets that we have written, they're not that bothered. They're 0 points against the driver's license, and they give it to the company who failed to put the chains in their vehicle. The company pays the fines and everybody moves on.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board?
So what's an alternate traction device?
It would be tire chains, or the newest product is called the Auto Sock, which is very simple to install, affordable, not much different in price than the tire chains. They're kind of neat little items. They don't last as well, but somebody can just pull over, put them on without all of the steps they have to take to put chains on the vehicle.
Do they not tear up the roadway quite as much either?
They are fabric, entirely fabric.
So I would expect
specialized fabric, but
okay.
they're very interesting, and I've seen them work very well. They have similar, I won't go into that. We're in a public venue on
Okay.
what they're called.
Okay. Kind of like putting skins on a cross-country ski.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, okay. All right. This is first reading, so we've got a recommended motion in the packet, if anyone would like to make it, if there's no further discussion.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, Lynette, I'll move to approve ordinance number 6, series 2020. An ordinance amending Title 10 of the Georgetown Municipal Code, adding section 10.04.120 regarding traction control devices on first reading and post at 3 locations and on the town webpage.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 6, series 2020 on first reading. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next, we have ordinance number 7. This is series 2020. This is also first reading. An ordinance amending chapter 5.28, the Georgetown of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning short-term rental of residential structures. Kent.
Police Judge Kelsey, members of the board, this is the result of some discussions over the last few months regarding short-term rentals. We had a list of items, and I'm sorry that wasn't put in your packet, the little spreadsheet or matrix that identified all the items that were up for discussion as of the two meetings ago, when you discussed it at length regarding a proposed ordinance amending the short-term rental ordinance. This is the result of that. The town attorney has drafted this short-term rental ordinance that basically takes the entire ordinance and provides the changes to you in 2 different ways, either by strike through on the actual code or by showing different parts that are adding to the code. And there was approximately about 15 to 20 items that were changed. But you guys had a lengthy discussion regarding all of those. So we've had a couple inputs lately regarding this proposed ordinance, but the proposed ordinance follows everything that the board directed regarding the changes, and it was on a wide variety of issues. But I'll leave it at that. And Jerry, if you can help finish me up as far as the explanation of this ordinance.
Certainly. As Kent mentioned, we used the spreadsheet that the board developed in its study session. And I will say that that was an enormous help to me. That really gave me the marching orders in a really clear way. And I was able to just march through this ordinance and make the changes. I had to sort of find the right place for each one to get stuck in, and I made some subjective decisions there, but not many, because the spreadsheet you had done was really clear. And so everything you see is mostly additions. There are some where there's a strike through, like the permit year, 365 days from issuance. You had said in your grid, let's start these at the end of the year or the first of the year. And so there's a different definition of term of permit that addresses that, as you see. And so that really helped. I also felt that it was important to show you the whole ordinance, because these changes are so interrelated with existing law that there's no way for you to really understand it unless you saw the whole thing. So I just went ahead and did that. And I think that's probably going to be helpful for second reading too, as people that want to testify second reading will be able to see the whole system. There are a couple places where there are blanks, though, and you might consider getting those filled in on first reading so that the public, when it goes out for posting, has the document that is going to be addressed at second reading. Those blanks are toward the end of the ordinance, about 3 pages in. You'll notice that you had directed that the ward limits be changed, and you'll see I invented a new term called ward limits and proximity limits to kind of deal with that. Ward limit, you'll notice in Ward 1 goes from 7% to 5% as you directed. And then there's the business about proximity and no more than one on a street segment. And I had to define what a street segment was between intersecting cross streets. Seems to make sense. But I was not clear, and maybe your intention was to impose these proximity limits in all 3 wards or not. And so I thought I'd leave those blanks, 3 blanks, for you to make that decision. And further on the proximity limits, you'll notice it kind of toward the end. It was not clear to me, and I think perhaps it wasn't even that fully discussed at your study session, what to do about proximity limits where you have multifamily buildings. I will also say this whole proximity limits language, by and large, is language that we lifted from Durango. And I think that was material that you had in front of you for the study session. So I largely lifted it, although I made, the edits that I need to make it track with the format and language of your ordinance. But those are 2 places where we could use some direction to fill in the blanks, assuming this gets adopted on first reading, so that then it's teed up for the hearing. That's all I've got, unless there are questions about what I put in various places and how that reflects what your spreadsheet told me to do.
I did have a question under section 5.28.040 permit required, under D, notice of application. The way the paragraph reads as it appears here, it sounds like we send out notices for both new and for renewals. And I believe we did make a change to not sending out renewal notices for renewals. They just get posted at the site.
I recall that discussion, I think, and you're right. That distinction isn't made. And the place to make it is letter D.
Okay.
So I can think about some language, but what I probably would add would be just a sentence at the end. Actually, we take out the words "or renewing," the very first line, right? And then add a sentence at the end and just say, notice of renewed permit shall be posted at town hall only. Does
Or
that address
don't they get a sign at the site?
Yeah, there's something posted on the property too.
We post a sign at the property for the renewal,
right,
as opposed to sending out the letters for the original.
Right.
Okay. And I think what we could do is just eliminate the words "or renewing" in the first line. I think that'll do it.
Sure.
Okay, I've made that note.
Okay. Okay. I know we did get some input from a couple of citizens. It was a couple that owns a short-term rental in Ward 1, and they were proposing a lot of changes to what we have come up with, particularly in Ward 1. I didn't know if it was persuading anybody to want to change anything that we had come up with as far as reducing the ward limits particularly in Ward 1 to 5% instead of 7%. I know I understood where they were coming from, but I think the density of the short-term rentals in that ward in particular is kind of what generated this whole discussion. So I personally would be reluctant to go against the rest of the public comment that we had already received that said we want fewer in Ward 1. So. How about the proximity limits in the different wards? Are we feeling like the proximity limits are really more geared towards spreading things out in Ward 1 than in the other 2 wards? And let's, leave the multifamily piece kind of off by itself, but I kind of feel like there hasn't been the same kind of problem of proximity in either Ward 2 or Ward 3 that we had in Ward 1. And so in my view, it didn't really need to apply to any other ward but Ward 1. But I'm open to comments from the board. Mary.
I didn't know if Tim was trying to talk. No. I'd like to keep the proximity consistent in Ward 2 and 3 also. I think the Ward 1 is just more dense as it stands, the layout, but I think there's value in not having several short-term rentals next door to each other. That changes the feel of the neighborhood in the other wards also.
All right. Tim, did you have something?
I don't know. I was kind of going both ways on that one. I'm not sure that specifically for Ward 3, I'm talking about that the proximity limits are a problem, but I do know that down on Clear Creek Road, where there's several homes that are adjacent to each other and they're short-term rental, it does give that part of the neighborhood a different character.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe I do agree with Mary on that one.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? I guess I could easily be persuaded to say, yes, we haven't had a huge problem in the other 2 wards, but if we suddenly had a changeover in locations of short-term rentals, as you guys apparently have on Clear Creek Road, it could become a problem if we didn't have the proximity rule applying to all 3 wards. So.
Yeah, the same is true for Ward 2. There's a grouping along Main that's kind of out of control too.
Huh. Not aware of that. Okay.
Where it kind of narrows.
In what section of Maine do you?
Down by Mary Lou Rutherford's, in that area.
Oh, okay. That is a narrow spot. Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm persuaded. Is everybody in agreement? We put that proximity limit applicable to all 3 wards.
Yep.
I do have to say thank you to Mary and Tim for saying that, because I recognize exactly what they're describing.
Okay.
I guess Keith would like a little bit of clarification of what you mean by there's a problem with the ones on Main. Because I haven't received any complaints with
there's a grouping along that area. I can't give you the.
No, I know which couple 3 there are. I'm just asking.
I have.
Has there been reported complaints to you regarding those?
I've heard from Mary Lou about issues regarding them.
Okay.
I've asked her to contact you about it.
Okay. Because I don't remember receiving anything. So.
Okay, so that kind of brings us to the proximity limits for multifamily. I wasn't really sure how to tackle that, whether we wanted to, I don't know how many we've got a few multifamily buildings a lot of variety on how many total units in each one. Ranging from like, I can think of like 2 buildings that have four apartments each approximately, and then down in Ward 2, kind of just down a block, and then at 11th, actually, there's an apartment building with about 8 units. So I'm not sure how we want it, whether we want to limit it by no more than so many short-term rentals per so many units in the same. Do we limit it in the same building? Is it in the same complex? I'm not real sure how we want to, and what problems have come up with any of the multifamily short-term rental locations.
I can speak to the multifamily. We have had people come in, especially regarding Silver Queen condos.
Okay.
We've had the HOA managers, or just, I guess, the manager on site, come in a couple times and complain about the parking there.
Okay.
And refresh my memory, is Silver Queen the one that it was against their HOA, or was that the condo, the Creekside that was across the way? Because.
That was Creek House.
Okay.
And we have
again,
concerns from them too.
Okay.
we're trying to protect the neighborhoods and, or key, I shouldn't say protect. We're trying to keep the neighborhood feel and the residential feel.
So preserve.
To preserve, thank you, my esteemed colleague. Whether it's a condo hallway, interior, exterior, we still want to afford that same opportunity for the people that live there. And so there should be the proximity rules similar to, I can see maybe it isn't the 5 lots, because I'm not that familiar with the layouts of each of those buildings, but I would like to see some separation so that you don't have a whole floor or, unit after unit after unit that becomes short-term rental.
Maybe limit it to 1 per floor.
Jennifer, do you have an idea of how those are laid out with the permits that we have that help guide us through this decision on the multifamily?
I mean, yes, I can tell you where they're located. I don't know if we want to do that right now in an open meeting, but yeah, I can tell you for sure.
I mean, can you tell us if they're on the same floor or they're on the same wing or building?
I mean, I can tell if they're in the same building, yes. Like on 1890 Argentine Street, which is the Creek House or Clear Creek condos. We have 3 in building D, I can tell you that, and 1 in building C. And then, say like in the Silver Queen condos, we have, let's see, 2 in building B, 1 in C, 1 in D, and 1 in A.
Okay, thanks. I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
And which is the one that has the prohibition with regard to the HOA?
I can answer that. That's Creek House condos, which is 1890 Argentine, buildings C and D only. Buildings A and B are Clear Creek condos.
Ah.
So the one that's in C and the one that's in D is in fact in violation.
Yeah, sure. They
Okay.
are.
So conceivably, we won't be renewing those permits.
They are going to be getting, they're going to be getting grandfathered in, especially since 3 out of the 4 of them between those 2 buildings are all board members. So I'm certain they'll be grandfathered in. The rule they have was just noticed recently under the new manager.
Board meeting of the board members of the condo, not board members
Correct.
of this
Correct.
existing board. Thanks for
Yes,
that clarification.
yes. HOA board members.
So, so you have 2, if I'm understanding correctly, you have 2 different HOAs in that complex of,
4.
of
Yes,
condos. 4 buildings, two buildings in each
correct.
HOA. And only one of the HOAs has a prohibition against short-term
Correct.
rentals. Okay, okay, that's much clearer than it used to be. So, okay. So do we know how many units? Well,
I like where you're going with that. How many units are in each building? And maybe we can use that as kind of a starting point, and then it can be applied to wherever. All use.
I
so,
can answer, there are 12 units in each building at Clear Creek condos, Creek House condos, and Silver Queen condos. Silver Queen condos has 6
okay,
buildings. Clear Creek condos has 2 buildings.
okay, with 12 in each. And those are, at this point, the largest condo buildings that this would be eligible in. So how in a building that's got 12 units, given that the proximity limits for standalone single families are, like it would allow more than one if you had more than 5 in a block. So would 2 units maximum in each building be an appropriate level, or?
I agree with that. I think 2 units, that would be consistent with how we're applying it to single family residential, and then perhaps put in something that they aren't next door to each other or directly across the, directly adjacent to, I suppose. Perpendicular, parallel, whatever
Across the
that word.
hall.
So, okay,
So there's some separation, so you don't have just those, and then that void.
so if you have 12 units in a building, they would be eligible to have 2 short-term rentals in that same building, but there would need to be a separation of 1 unit at least in between 2.
Maybe
that what
2
I'm
to be
hearing?
conscientious so that a permanent or more full-time resident doesn't feel like they're locked in between 2
Surrounded.
short-term units. So there'd be some.
Are you talking about per floor?
No, I think, there's 3 floors in the Silver Queen. I don't know how many, is it 2 floors in Creek House or 3? 3. So,
So any direction. So if you had one on the floor above, they couldn't have one until it was diagonal from it below.
Jerry's got his pen raised.
Sorry, I should have raised my hand. We can write almost anything But I'm really sensitive to the enforcement burdens created, by a certain level of detail. And, I can sort of see one short-term rental per every 6 units in a multifamily structure. No such permits may be adjacent to one another. I think you could probably understand from an enforcement standpoint. I'd be curious to see what the marshal thinks of that, but you could probably measure that. And when a new permit application walks in for the unit next door, then the town administrator can fairly easily say, okay, but if they've got to also kind of figure out what's on the floor underneath, and is it diagonal or whatever. The main approach, I think, is a density approach when you think about it. And that's really what, even on a single block, the street segment, 1 per street segment, that's a density restriction, and you kind of, make your choice around what's appropriate. But doing more than that, I think, is tricky. And I get the business about adjacent ones or parallel or across the hall. But at some point, I can imagine the fact patterns will start to multiply. If you the more restrictions you add, the more it's hard to kind of apply to the next building and the one after that. I will also say, and then I'll shut up, but I'll also say that you have the right to decide that short-term rental permits are not really appropriate in multifamily structures, period. And you can just say that, and you can say that any ones that are presently there are allowed to continue until, until they otherwise expire. But you may well not choose to exercise that authority, but I want you to know that you can make distinctions between single-family residences and multifamily buildings. This is not an entitlement, that everyone gets. This is a right that you can distribute with some kind of legislative basis, and it's a perfectly acceptable legislative basis to say not appropriate for multifamily developments, or not appropriate for multifamily developments of more than X units or less than Y units. You have that power. You may well not exercise it, I understand, but I want to make sure you knew you had it. That's all I got on that. I don't know how the marshal feels about, kind of keeping track and doing the numbers and enforcing is tricky, although that in the first instance is done by the town administrator in the issuance of the permit. But then later it's what kind of issues arise with that kind of density, and that's for your discussion.
I think multifamily units that limit 2 per 6 is a good idea. Trying to say they can't be next to each other or within that proximity to each other is different, because all of the buildings are configured differently. So it's hard to put that into place. That could just be a singular decision on all the applications for the permits. And the same thing for density with the single family residences. You have a great number of them that are next door to each other or within a couple of doors apart, especially Ward 3. I think of 1, 2, 3, 4 within a block and a half. So, but beyond that, just the configurations, that particular restriction probably isn't very viable.
That makes some sense. I mean, you're already kind of in close proximity to each other just by virtue of it being a condo, and it's that kind of a dwelling. So one short-term rental per 6 units and maximum 2 short-term rentals per building. Is that how we want to?
I like
Phrase
that,
it.
but I still think that we can preserve some full-time residents feel by not having them at least adjacent to each other, no matter what the layout is. You know, we're defining in the proximity limits, you know, abutting to corners, everything else. I don't think it's that difficult to apply that to a multi-family unit. However, I also like the option for us to consider that Jerry has brought up, because one of the other reasons we were looking and reviewing this ordinance was because we were concerned about housing for people that work in this community. And typically, most of our multifamily properties would assist in that fashion. Not all, but most of them. And so that brings us back to trying to find that balance between the destination place and a residential community.
Well, right now I can tell you the multifamily units are going to be our biggest violators. They currently are, as far as not being permitted, and trying to track them down and locate them is always difficult. With the restrictions, that's going to even add more to it. But so it's difficult. So we'll see how it works.
Okay.
I don't think the ability to enforce or the difficulty in that should be our persuasive piece, because we've also
Not
looked
at all.
at penalties for those who don't comply. And we also know that all of our current short-term rentals are being grandfathered in and won't be affected by some of these changes, or they won't be affected by these changes.
Absolutely. No, not at all. That's not where I was going with that.
Okay.
If
All
I
right.
could say one thing,
Yes.
Mary and I have noticed when we check on the VRBO sites and Airbnb and all those sites, that people often advertise for more guests than they're allowed. And we don't know what to do about that.
Okay. Okay. It, you know, from a strictly interpretation of the ordinance, even as it currently exists, if they were limited to a certain number of guests and they exceed it, then they're subject to, and it gets reported, they would be subject to whatever the penalties, you know, suspension, revocation, any of those would be applicable. So
I agree, and it's that kind of sort of behavior that would be appropriate for the town to keep track of when it came time for either renewal or even earlier than that. If, you know, they've advertised for more, there are more there, it's creating problems, you can send warning letters and actually revoke in midstream. And that can be one of the reasons. It's a little like liquor licensees where there have been warning letters and you kind of collect those up. And when it comes renewal time, that's something that you consider whether you're going to renew or not. I don't think that the town can by code prohibit someone from putting one thing or another in an ad. And with this one, I'm not sure that I'd even go there in terms of the towns. That's an enforcement activity that I think staff is pretty busy already processing these things.
okay. Numbers of people kind of bring up one of the letters that we got with feedback. was referencing the age cutoff that we had talked about being appropriate, and maybe it's not appropriate for minor children. So 18 and under being part of the family, and maybe not subject to the 2 adults per bedroom limitation that we had talked about, rather than the 14-year-old cutoff that we had arrived at our last meeting. So anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with raising the age up, so that, you know, if you have a 18-year-old kid with you, it's still your kid,
Mhm.
you know, and you may want them to be able to stay there with you.
And, you know, the kids generally get put on the pull-out couch or a cot, or even just a sleeping bag on the floor. So, and you know, they're not, generally speaking, they're not driving separately. So, I don't have a problem with raising that age limit, I think. So, anyone else?
So along those lines, on that particular section under the occupancy, just for more clarification, we have written that it's no more than 2 persons age 14 at the moment and above may occupy a single bedroom devoted to the short-term rental purpose. Are we, and I'm getting anal on this, are we defining a bedroom, and how in the application, and I apologize for not having it in front of me, then do we limit how many can be on the pullouts and how many can be on the futons? Because that was something that we discussed prior to this, where bedrooms or non-bedrooms are being turned into bunk rooms, and it just becomes more of a, you know, youth hostel type.
Dormitory.
Exactly. And so our discussion in limiting it, you know, or putting the age limit of 14 on there, we're not trying to prohibit someone from bringing their 18-year-old somewhat independent child with them on the family vacation, but we're also saying, well, that person takes up more space and then they need a bedroom, you know, kind of thing. You know, how many cribs does a hotel allow you to bring in as extra, you know, or extra fold down beds? There's a limitation to that, to what can be in that household. So should we, I don't know if a bedroom per se needs to be defined. If you're in a typical house, a bedroom has a closet. So how is the application, and maybe Kent or Jen might be able to address my questions on this. How are we still reining in the number of occupants, children and or adults, so that we don't have 10 people sleeping on sleeping bags on the floor, in addition to the pullouts and the futons in the bedrooms?
What I say to people is we determine it by the number of bedrooms, and there's 2 people per bedroom, and then the parking has to coincide with that as well.
I think parking.
And if they had a pull-out couch, then we recognize that might be used for children, and so we might allow an extra 1 or 2 for the pull-out bed, if it, you know, for kids, is kind of how I say it.
So if we have a 2-bedroom house, we've got four people right there, and if they have a pull-out couch, we allow probably 2 more. And so do we specify that then in the application once it's approved, that they can't have any more than 6 people in that house, in that rental?
I mean, they write down their number of occupancy, and that's supposed to be part of the life safety inspection, where they're putting the number of the maximum occupancy on a little sheet in the short-term rental.
But so we're
If
giving
that
you the
answers it.
well, and so we're trying to define that and to limit that to be so that to me is still too vague. We might allow how many people, you know, we're still not limiting the occupancy by the way this is written. We're coming close, but we're not giving you good guidelines, Jen, because there's still too much of a gray area then. Can they have two people on the pullout and but then they have one more kid? Are we saying, or one more adult? Are we saying that adult can go into a sleeping bag on the floor? Well, if there's just one, how about two? I thought we were trying to limit the occupancy for the property.
I agree. It's a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah, and we're kind of graying it up as well. In some ways, maybe what we say is occupancy maximum 2 persons per bedroom, and maybe plus 2 dependent children. 2 additional dependent children are allowed. Or do we not even count dependent children because yeah, I don't know.
I think you can't count children.
Go ahead, Tim.
I said, I think you cannot count the dependent children. That it's going to be different with every person that goes into that building or that rents the short-term rental. How many kids they have. That's a really hard one there.
I don't remember declaring, having kids with me when I went and rented a hotel room. They asked how many adults.
Yeah.
Most short-term rentals though will ask you how many occupants you're going to have. Even if it's a 3-bedroom, there's a difference between 2 people renting that 3-bedroom for whatever reason they choose to do that compared to 6 or 8 people renting that. And sometimes that's factored into some of their cleaning prices and other factors. So they do ask how many people will actually be staying in that home or staying on that property. That is a typical number of guests. How many adults, how many children, how many pets, how many goldfish? That is a typical question when you reserve a short-term rental.
Yeah, but really, won't the parking limitation deal with that? I mean, if they can only park 2 cars off the road at that residence, then that's the limit. That's how many people they can have.
It could be a van of 10 people.
True, but if
the truth hurts.
Well, it's
it points
to
the whole thing we're trying to do is take care of the parking problems. Isn't that what started this whole thing?
Well, some of it was also occupancy because you start to have large groups in a house that really was never intended to accommodate a large group. You've got a problem, even if you don't have any parking issues. So
yeah, but
you're trying
from
to
a police point of view, though, 4 8-year-olds is far different than 4 22-year-olds. Unless Randy wants to start picking on the 8-year-olds. So.
From a parent's point of view, 4 8-year-olds are much harder than.
So So 2 persons, 2 adults per bedroom are the maximum, and we don't bother counting dependent children? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm kind of there.
I'm there.
Come on, Keith, spout off.
At what age are children no longer dependent?
Well, you know, I'm not.
50 or so.
30?
When they are of legal age to sign contracts, to vote, to join the military, we consider that they're adults.
Okay.
So, you know, anybody younger than that is a dependent child in the eyes of the law. So.
I think.
Let's not go to dependent. Let's just say 18 and cut to the chase.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you say
All right.
if you say 18, you don't have to have the rest of the discussion.
All right, sounds good. So
I think we focus, as Tim said, on vehicles and parking and all that.
which we've done. So are we ready to move to parking, or do we want to, have we resolved? I think we just changed the age on 18 to 2 persons per bedroom, age 18 or older. And okay, so parking was left at that you're required to have off-street parking, and it has to be on the subject property. There has been some suggestion from the public, some of the public, to loosen that and allow these other lease agreements, which experience has taught us that sometimes that is, it's not being followed. So why would we want to go that direction in the first place? So open it up for discussion.
Lynette, just
Yes.
I'm taking notes as we go, and I know that you're about to have a substantive discussion on this, but I'm glad you're raising it, because as I wrote it, I was not completely clear that there could be some circumstances where a short-term rental permit would be approved where there was on-street parking allowed for that unit. If that's not true, then at a minimum, I would change number 1 under D to say all parking shall be, all parking for guests shall be off-street and located only on the subject property. And I'll do that, understanding that you may want to, you're about to have a discussion about whether that off-street parking could be proximate to that was kind of my attempt to say, and it needs to be more clear, and I apologize. But if you allow off-street parking to be other than on the subject property, my beginning sort of effort on that was to say that it needed to be proximate, understanding that the parking plan has to be approved by the town administrator as a part of permit. So you do have the ability to have the administrator determine whether it's proximate or going to work or not. And you don't have to necessarily write all those rules in the code, but I know the administrator probably really appreciate some direction in the code. Sorry for derailing your discussion, but I wanted to make sure you heard where I was coming from on that.
It's all good.
Thank you.
Sure. So my recollection of previous discussion was that people felt very strongly that it needed to be on the subject property, not proximate, and that was based on a fair amount of experience that people had not really adhered to lease agreements that they had formally drawn up with the people who were providing that proximate off subject property parking. And so those, when that relationship falls apart, then the short-term rental visitors end up parking on the street, and that created quite a lot of the issues that we were experiencing, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So, in one of the letters that we received, there was a suggestion to make a separate fee schedule for applications and permits when people are just renting out a room in their home. And I understand the motivation behind that. However, it takes the same amount of staff time to process a permit. And there's a business license, there's a sales tax license, there's the short-term rental permit. And so I'm not really in favor of adjusting. I understand the motivation for the question and the request, but I'm not really in favor of creating a separate fee schedule for those types of short-term rentals. I don't know how anybody else feels about it.
That's fine.
I agree.
Okay. Point was well taken, but it's still, it was the short-term rental permitting, and the fees that we established were not intended ever to be a money-making proposition. They were to cover staff time and the processing. So I think we leave them as they are. So, except for the renewals being the same as the initial new permits. And what does everybody think about that?
I think that's good.
I think that's very fair.
Okay. Have I missed anything that anybody else picked up on from feedback that we've gotten since our last meeting that we want to incorporate into this document on first reading?
Not feedback, but I had a couple of points to clarify.
Okay.
So when we define the short-term rental with the less than 29 days, it's on the second page at the top. Shouldn't it be less than 29 consecutive days? Otherwise, I suppose you could broadly interpret that to be 29 days in the course of the year. And that's not what we're looking at as a short-term rental.
Sure, that's fine. I can add that.
And then a question on 5.28.040, the permit required under section C, the term of permit. Just a question, if we are issuing permits after October 1st and then allowing them to expire December 31st of the following year, do we prorate those in some way and charge the people still 15 months as opposed to a year?
Not presently. I mean, presently you just have a permit application.
Would there be a reason that we wouldn't want to charge for those extra 3 months as opposed to giving them to them for free because they're applying in October?
There are persons, of course, who apply earlier in the year that pay the full permit and don't get 12 months. So in the end, it probably is a wash. Unless you want to get into a more detailed accounting process, which generally you try to avoid.
Just a question. Under section F, moving on then, on section F, the adjacent property notification, is it not supposed to be note of the fourth line? Isn't it supposed to be as in subparagraph D, not C?
Yeah.
I think we kind of lost.
Yeah, Yeah, you're right. Because we
Okay.
added- I think we added a subparagraph.
Okay. And then the last one on the page on I, the no transfer. Short-term rental permits may be used only for the property for which they are issued and not transferred upon sale. We had some discussion, or it was in some of the notes that was provided for us for research, as far as where it stayed with the applicant. And so if I have a short-term rental, I die, my house goes to my kids, they don't automatically assume my short-term rental permit. So it stayed with the applicant, it didn't stay with the, so it not only is it not transferable upon sale, but it's not transferable, you know, from bequeathing it. That was my understanding.
About just saying that it's not transferable, period.
That works. That works. I just wanted to give you my thought process. Thanks, Tim. That's why I like you. You're short and sweet on this. Not short, not, you know what I mean. I think my other questions have been asked and answered, but hold on, give me 2 seconds. There may only be 1 or 2 more. Oh, under lodging and sales tax, just a question again to Kent and Jennifer. Do we have issues with our applicants or our short-term rental owners with not having the sales tax number and permit on a timely basis and then collecting that sales tax because I know that was a reason for a potential suspension if they weren't, you know, paying whatever they needed to pay. Has that been an issue for our town? On more than one occasion?
I mean, that's a question for Mary more.
Yeah.
It is an ongoing thing with the collection of sales tax, and our ordinance states right now whether or not the state allowed Airbnb and VRBO and HomeAway all to collect on behalf of their clients. However, they do not specify who they are collecting for. So that's why we require that they have their own sales tax license and they have to report even if it's 0. But it's hard to track if they're only renting through VRBO and Airbnb. And it is an ongoing problem. You know, people go, well, I didn't know I still had to report. Well, yes, that's all explained to you when you apply, even if you are only doing it through Airbnb and VRBO.
So is it a value then to put a time limit on when we anticipate receiving those taxes from our short-term rentals, so that when it comes down the line and it becomes an individual problem for, we've got some grounds to look at a potential suspension? 60 days, 90 days, I don't know.
The problem is that Airbnb and VRBO and all these other small ones do not specify who they are collecting for. They just send in a bulk amount. So you don't know, for example, you don't know if the short-term rental is doing it on their own and through VRBO and just not reporting what they collect. Here's an example. I have one that we had a complaint at town hall, and they normally go through these agencies. And then the lady said, no, that the owner said, do it directly for me. I'll save you money on sales tax. because she wasn't going to charge it. So, I mean, it's a problem that, and I don't see any way to get around it because the state has allowed them to do it this way.
Okay.
Could
All
we
right.
as a town could we force the issue and make them delineate who paid, what those funds were for?
No. I've asked, and the way that the state agreed to let them report for their clients, no, they don't have to specify who they are paying for.
Could we then not allow certain, whether it's VRBO or whatever the name of it is, could we disallow them from participating within our town?
I guess that would be a Jerry question, but I wouldn't think so.
Let's ask Jerry.
Yeah, that would require a new regulatory scheme. That number one would be a little hard to write, and number two, then you've now saddled the staff with a real administrative and enforcement duty that I'm just, with the greatest of respect to staff, that I just don't know that they're staffed up to be able to accomplish. And more importantly, the people you really need to control are, in fact, the short-term rental operators. And eventually, that's really in terms of what you're providing to the community. It's short-term rentals in a way that allows some residents to make some money in a way that doesn't sort of physically impact the lives of others. And sort of dealing with Airbnb on sort of a separate regulatory battle doesn't really advance that goal much. There are some things in the world that are wrong, but and I don't disagree with that, but where do you put your resources in correcting wrong things? And I think you're wise to be putting them into addressing the health, safety, welfare, peace of mind, peace of living there, and economic health of the residents that you represent. And you're doing that in this ordinance.
Two more under safety and operations, where we ask that it's the responsibility of the owner representative to inform short-term rental tenants regarding town ordinances, blah, 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 blah. We had discussion about making sure that off-site owner representative was responsive within an hour. Is that contained in some other part of the actual physical application, or would that be appropriate to put in here?
Sorry, I promise it is not me who's hammering. I don't know who is.
Oh, that's me. I'm sorry. That's why I try to mute, but
Oh,
it's,
okay.
I'm
All right.
multitasking here. I apologize.
Okay. Did you get a building permit for that work?
You better believe it. It's on the door. Come check.
Okay, just check.
That hasn't expired yet, Mary?
Yeah, these building permits, they're. I think that's fair. I remember the discussion. I didn't know that it got completed, but I know in other cities that's a really important measure and control. And I think probably the place to put it is in 080A. There should be an owner rep who's on call full-time 24/7 within a 60-minute travel radius to manage the property, et cetera, et cetera. Does that work?
It was more that they responded, or at least that they were responsive to a phone call or a call for concern within an hour, so that Randy or someone else isn't trying to call with some issue or whatever, and we can't get a hold of somebody who represents that property. Not, responding in 60 minutes would be great too, but then the highway will get shut down. And then my last one, I promise, everyone. Under 5, under that same code where it says town and owner rules regarding pets, parking, trash and noise. And perhaps we could include, though it is included elsewhere, snow and ice removal, so that our tenants of the short-term rentals understand, especially as we're such a winter destination. Thanks. I'm done, I promise.
Are there objections to that? No objections, all right.
Good idea.
I think it's good.
Okay.
Spelling issue on, under section 5.28.090 B, we've got interesting, and under C1, we've got interesting spellings of violation.
Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, where was the second one?
C, sub item 1.
Gotcha, okay.
The
Got it.
permittee is, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Lynette, there's been someone in the
Yes.
comments that asking whether there's public comment, but I just wanted to make sure that
I'm
you
I'm
had
getting there.
said that there was
Yes,
public
I
comment
saw
at the second reading, but just let you know.
So, we've received a lot of comments in the chat, and I'm okay with opening. Well, let me qualify. So traditionally, first reading is supposed to be just amongst the board with whatever feedback we've already received. What it seems like we've got a couple of options here, and I put it to the board to decide which option we want to go with. We could take all of the comments that have been put into the chat, and Jen could compile them and make sure that we get them during our before our next meeting, which, if we pass this on first reading, second reading will be the public hearing. That's how it's supposed to work. What's been happening quite frequently is on first reading, the public wants to make comments like this was the public hearing, and we could do that as well. What ends up happening generally is we take public comment in a meeting that's not supposed to be public hearing, and then nobody comes to the public hearing one. So it's up to you, members of the board. Let me know what you'd prefer. I think we could incorporate all of the comments that are in the chat in our thoughts and discussion in second reading. I think that also gives other people time to collect their thoughts and maybe get them written out in less cryptic format, and then also, join us at the meeting and give us their input. So I put it to the board. What would you like to do?
Let's keep it the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I'd like.
Yeah, public
Okay.
hearing and second reading.
Yeah, I like the second
Okay.
reading part, public.
Okay. Mary, Keith, any strong feelings?
Well, I guess I went away for a couple minutes. So what we're saying is, shall we allow public participation on second reading? Was that the question?
Well, that's when it traditionally is supposed to be. That's second reading is when the public hearing would be
Right.
held. So I'm okay allowing some public comment if you guys would like to, but I'm hearing more that are in favor of waiting until the second reading to do our public hearing and receive those comments. We would also take anything that was put into the chat and have that as part of our packet when we go to second hearing. Does that seem reasonable?
That's fine.
I'm fine with that.
Fine.
I like,
Okay,
Yeah, I agree.
okay. All right, thank you so much. So, further discussion, any other items that need to be hashed out, ironed out?
With regard to short-term rentals,
Yes, this ordinance.
yeah, if
Before
we go back to A, ward limits, and we're reducing Ward 1 from 7 to 5%, there are some of those that are going to have to be leaving. And
No.
do we handle that from the standpoint of when things expire? When their permits expire, they just are not re-allowed?
I think more in the idea of, by attrition. So either somebody decides not to renew their short-term rental, or they sell the property and it's not eligible any longer, that permit doesn't transfer, so they're no longer counted as a short-term rental permit. And you let your numbers reduce until you are at that 5%. You continue to maintain whatever waiting lists, and but you're allowed to renew as long as you don't have any complaints and any reason to revoke that license, that permit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that doesn't really take care of the parking congestion in some of the areas in Ward 1 that are just a problem. So I guess we'll have to address that by having neighbors complain.
If there's a violation going on, I think that's what we have to do.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, there is a recommended motion in your packet. You could just, on first reading with the changes discussed, and let Jerry refer back to his notes for all the edits that we've given him.
I can do that.
Do you want the motion?
Please.
I move to approve ordinance number 7, series 2020, and ordinance amending Title 5 of the Georgetown Municipal Code concerning short-term rentals of residential structures in first reading, and post at 3 locations on the town website.
John, if you would add to that motion, including the changes as directed during the first reading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance number 7, series 2020 on first reading with the changes as directed. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to staff items. Mary, did you have any comments that you wanted to make on the, October financial report?
Just that, if you'll notice on the sales tax report, we are up again quite a bit. Mainly due to the online purchases. But other than that, nothing's glaring as far as out of control.
Okay.
It looks good.
All right. So next on our staff items would be discussion on the 6th Street pedestrian walkway. I've personally gotten a lot of feedback that suggestions that we remove the barriers and allow vehicle traffic. Number one, to make snow removal easier. Number two, because we're not having Christmas market, our crowds are way down. And so to me, it makes sense to take it away, restore access to 6th Street for vehicles. How does everybody feel?
I agree. There's just nothing going on, so let's just open it up.
I would just like to throw out and remind everyone that we did it for social distancing, and we don't know, which is part of the next part of the conversation under our staff notes, what we anticipate for people coming to Georgetown, whether or not we have Christmas market or not. And the fact now that we have a higher risk level, which is why more places are not operating as usual, brings us back to the social distancing aspect and the protection of health and safety.
Okay.
I'd like to go ahead and just open it up. I think it's time, and with the fire board, there's concern with the barricades being in the way of response. So until we can either come up with something that works for that, I think that's a good reason as well to remove it. You know, snow removal and emergency response. Plus, I don't think we're going to see the crowds.
I agree.
I agree too. I'm all in favor of opening the road back up.
Okay. I actually think that those first two weekends of December, we may see, it's so hard to pinpoint how many, but we may see larger than a typical weekend crowd, just because people are used to those 2 weekends being Christmas market. However, I think the pedestrian walkway has served its purpose very well, and it did provide us with a lot of social distancing of the crowds that we had all summer and well into the fall. And I think it's time to, I think it would be a good idea to remove the barriers, open it up, and we can always, if let's talk about what provisions we might want to put in place for the 2 weekends that would have been Christmas market, but aren't going to be able to be held even as planned, much less as tradition would have called for. So would anybody like to make a motion to open the 6th Street closed areas?
I'll make that motion to open it back up to traffic.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to open up 6th Street to vehicular traffic. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I oppose.
Okay. So, thank you. All right. COVID update. Did you have anything, Kent, besides well, I just wanted to make sure that everybody on the board knows that we're putting through a second round of business support grants because the county got new funding. So make sure that word gets out. There are individual support funding grant opportunities, and and the money has to be spent by the end of the year. So if there are individual citizens with, you know, things like housing, utilities, there's, you know, there are support opportunities, there's money available, and that application would go through the county. And hopefully there will be continuing funding, grant support opportunities. You never know what the legislature will put through. I have high hopes, but you know, we're gonna have to wait and see.
I do think, Lynette, though, regarding this level red, it is hitting one sector of our economy harder than other sectors. Been contacted by a couple different restaurants, but I haven't been contacted by all of them, of course. Well, I've hardly been, a little harder to contact for the last week or so. But, you know, this level red has really impacted the restaurants and the brew pubs and bars within our town far more than the other sectors of the economy, because they're basically not allowed to operate except for pickup and delivery. And that is a very serious thing. Yes, there are some funding available, and some of our restaurants have been able to get that funding through the county. And with the second round, even more of them should be able to be helped with that. But I would want, it's a minor thing for the board to do, but I think it would at least do some action to show our support for those type of businesses. It's the same thing we did at the beginning of this series of events that occurred in March and April, is that we allow our utility bills as far as the late fees, especially for the businesses that are really affected, that we won't charge them late fees for those type of things. I think that's at least a minimum what to do. Would also like you to consider, but not asking for immediate response, but just for something to think of. If there was something else we can do, either through utility bills or through, I did have one restaurant contact whether they could have assistance to purchase some additional equipment so they could set up outside. I had another restaurant owner say, I don't know where you're going to find that stuff because everybody's looking for it. But if they were, whether or not the county funding goes through, if you would just direct staff to work with them as much as possible to be able to assist in purchasing those type of items, if it becomes, you know, it's not going to be a major expense, but if it becomes that way, that staff can at least have the discussion with them and look at them to assist those businesses. Would either of those two things be objectionable by the board?
I just worry about the viability of providing any kind of funding for, I mean, it's cold, it's going to be colder than crap here pretty quick. How feasible is it for them to set up a tent with no heat? As far as helping them with utilities, I'm all for that.
Okay.
The other suggestion that was made to me was that because of our National Historic Landmark District designation, some of the improvements to provide shelter out in outdoor situations requires DRC approval. And even if it's just for a temporary measure that you're just trying to put up a windbreak or set up some tents, and by the time you've paid all of the DRC fees and you've gone through the DRC process, you've lost a lot of money and time that could be better spent towards, you know, putting temporary measures in place. And I guess I'm all in favor of doing whatever we can to speed up that process and streamline it. If it's a temporary measure that's going to be taken down as soon as the weather improves in the spring, and as long as whatever we do in this direction doesn't endanger our standing as a landmark historic district, I'm all in favor of simplifying, and I don't know what kind of ordinance or emergency measure might be able to be put in place, but the speedier the better.
And I've done a couple of ordinances for other cities addressing that issue, allowing the manager, administrator to issue permits for temporary structures, tents, and signs, I think, we're all talking about the same kind of stuff. It's tents with heaters in them, some signage, and some structures generally, because sometimes maybe it's a tent, maybe it's a cold frame that is kind of halfway between a structure and a tent. And as an alternative to the regular building permit process, and obviously it would be up to you, it could be an alternative to the DRC or it could be outside of the DRC process and allow that to happen without DRC review. Unless maybe the administrator wanted to kick it to DRC, you could kind of structure it that way. But it almost has to be an administratively approved process. Otherwise, it's just not timely enough. The circumstances are kind of each unique, and they don't comply with a lot of other code requirements. And that's kind of the whole point, almost, that they be allowed to just be there for a little while. So we can certainly put together something for the board to look at. That is something that has to be done by ordinance, and the board would need to be comfortable with kind of the scope of the authority granted and some of the parameters around it. But we can provide an example for you.
Okay. I'd like you to.
Okay.
Yeah, I would too.
I know Kent will be delighted to have one more program to administer.
Got to get us through the winter.
Yeah. Well, and there's different things. Hopefully this lasts just for 30 days, if at most, maybe another month beyond that. But if it lasts longer than that, then there's serious other problems involved.
Yes.
So
I did tune in just so that I don't know who else might have been there, but I did tune in to the public health update to the commissioners today, and Clear Creek County has had 25 new confirmed cases in the last 7 days.
For a total of 172 as of today.
Okay. He said 57 in the last 2 weeks, and I didn't catch a total figure. So thank you, Keith.
And 2 deaths now instead of 1.
Sure. So, and still a lot of concerns about hospitalization and so on and so forth. So I'm hoping, it's a little bit of a reduction, but that could all be due to how batches of test results come in. So I'm not throwing the big party yet. I'm hopeful though. Let's hope Thanksgiving doesn't set us back too terribly far.
You can't throw the big party.
Yeah, it's only 10 people.
I know.
They're all from the same household.
It's a virtual, yes, I know.
Virtual party, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
So
I don't know anybody would want to eat with me anyway.
So On to tree lighting. I have, Clear Creek County has already put out, I mean, we had talked last time about doing tree lighting virtually, and they've already announced that we're gonna do a virtual tree lighting at 6:30 on Saturday, where we normally would have done the in-person. So anything to add, Mary?
Paul Boat's actually in the audience and
Oh.
from Business Promotions. I think he's got a handle on it. If he
Okay.
wouldn't mind stepping up and he could just tell us what's going on rather than me reading emails.
I've also heard from Tom Elliott, who wants everybody to know that he's going to be, and other people are going to be ringing the bells at 6:30, and they invite everybody in town to ring a bell at that time too.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Hey,
Paul.
Commissioners and police judge and staff. Yes, that's basically what I was going to reiterate. We, from what I understand, I'm glad the county has a virtual tree lighting already going. Promotions Commission was working on, last we spoke, a feed for a live YouTube or Facebook Live. We'll be putting out, I guess, through social media, a link locally that could be used for a Zoom meeting so people could get together prior to tree lighting time. That's separate from the picture of the tree, I think. So that people can, hang out and talk in Zoom if they want to do that. That's up to them. And then we have arranged, Tom Elliott has arranged for us to have all the bells going as we do on New Year's Eve at 6:30. That would be the time to turn on your lights for your house if you have those on or ready to go. And then the ringing of the bells, if you have a bell at your house or whatever, kind of like the howl in the spring that we were all doing at 6:30 to celebrate our tree lighting and the beginning of our Christmas season. So thank you very much. And we will start to get some social media advertising and word of mouth out as quickly as possible to make sure that people understand that this is virtual and not in person, and that we're all participating as well as we can while keeping each other safe, and for our business community and for ourselves.
Wonderful.
It's also my understanding that there's a virtual happy hour, and this is a time that we could support our local restaurants and other establishments. I think there's going to be some special offerings from them.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
And that would be the Zoom conference, and then go get your stuff from the restaurants and we can all hang out. So thank you very much and have a wonderful evening, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, snow plowing.
Okay, so you're gonna have to put up with the noise in the background. Sorry, Jerry. So we all received an email from a resident concerned about snow plowing, again, some issues that they experienced today. So I just kind of wanted to clarify again, do our snow plows, I would imagine that they come out and they make every street passable with one lane. And then do they come back out and clear the road curb to curb if we had such curbs? Or what should we be expecting, and how many times do you want to get phone calls, Kent?
I spoke with one of the employees today after that occurred. He had already talked with the homeowner, actually the husband of the homeowner, the person who, and had partially, he was correcting the situation and then was going to get it taken care of. And then he's coming back out in the morning regarding some additional on that place. But he had already contacted the owner after that email, that letter or email had already been contacted. What they do, yes, they do go around and make one swipe, and then they come back and they either widen it. The biggest problem with what occurred at that one property was there was one property, I understand, used to be where they ended up placing the snow. It's now owned by a different owner. So they're having to switch the procedure regarding that particular block. So, or move it to a little bit different location. So that was part of the issue with that block, but they take care of every block and then they come back and widen it out as they can. So, it's, they try to make one swipe first going through out the town and then they come back. I know Paul had an issue as well. They ended up coming back to that location. Did they get you taken care of, Paul, as far as the snow that was in front of your house as well? Because I had talked with them earlier today about that as well.
No, last time I checked, nobody's been back.
Okay. Okay. Because that's obviously the construction equipment's on the other side, but they will be there in the morning. That was one other thing that I highlighted with them. So,
Okay, thank you.
but because of the construction equipment, there's additional problems at in that block as far as removing the snow. So, but we do get contacted. The ladies at town hall had a couple different issues. They contacted the road and bridge employees to handle those issues as well. So it's oftentimes a fluid thing as far as what's the immediate response needed for different areas. So
Is all of our equipment working well, or are we down a truck or?
we're not down a truck, but there is one truck that would work better with the sander that's not working as well as it should. The older white truck would be better to have the sander on than on the pickup that they're using regarding sand. But other than that, they do have, most of the equipment is working and operating.
Okay.
I have a question regarding one piece of equipment, but that's more internal. That's not for a public meeting. That I had a question about at the end of today that was reported to me. So I still need to find out that information. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. And finally, the first 2 weekends in December, which would have been Christmas market, but had to be suspended because of our level red status. So did you have specific concerns, Mary?
I know Business Promotions had a special meeting and didn't really get the chance to discuss it much. I didn't know if Kent was involved in any more conversation, like you had even brought up. I believe there's still an anticipation that we are still going to get more traffic than we would normally get, just because people are accustomed to that. And, they may have seen it, planned it, and didn't realize it was canceled per se. So in an effort to, support our merchants during these trying economic times, I was just wondering if we had any kind of a handle on how we were rolling that out, or the Visit Georgetown sites and social media. I also had a question. We had approved, as a board, I know a few months ago, we had approved a liquor permit, a temporary liquor permit for Slaymaker Cellars, and they were a vendor out there for a few, activities that were going on in the fall. And there was a couple of other vendors there that had been arranged through the prior event coordinator. I'm wondering if they're still set up. I mean, because the typical market is not continuing as normally held. And so what are we planning as a town to help our merchants, but to recognize that an event is not the healthiest and safest thing to do right now with our level of risk? And I don't know if I have an answer or expect an answer from you, Kent. Maybe, let us know, because we still have another week and a half to go. But
Well, there is one thing as far as, and I didn't get it on the agenda just because I've been sick since Thursday morning. And, but I was going to have on here, and I'll have it at the next meeting, but I'll ask the board just to be, if it would be okay, that I was going to have the standard professional services agreement with the new event coordinator that was chosen by business promotions. I was going to have that at tonight's meeting, but I wasn't able to get it accomplished for the packet on Friday and then for tonight, but we'll take care of the formal agreement later. But if it's okay with the board, I'd like to get her on board and get her started. And we'll take care of the formal agreement, which will be the same agreement that the previous event coordinator was working under. As far as a direct thing like that, and then work with her. Her name's Katie Rutten. That will be as far as what the announcement to the people. I know that Paul mentioned earlier as far as the tree lighting and the promotions, we'll be doing some additional things next week as well to try to let people know that you know, the town is still here. The town is still open. We won't have any special events. We will not have any perimeter setting like we do with the regular Christmas market. But the town is still here, and the businesses are still open on 6th Street, obviously. Mm-hmm. Give them additional options about how they can contact regarding picking up from restaurants if they need to, those type of things. But that's a conversation I need to have with her, obviously, as we go forward.
So, and I think the Clear Creek Resiliency Collaborative that Kent and I have been working with, they have been putting together business kits. So hand sanitizer, masks, thermometers, tags to put on the floor or on the wall to keep people social distanced. I think they had made provisions to hand them out, to distribute them through the resource center in Idaho Springs. But I requested if we had businesses in Georgetown wanting a kit, that maybe they could bring some kits down to town halls so that our businesses didn't have to travel all the way to Idaho Springs to pick them up. So hopefully that will help. I hope the businesses here in town have a plan for crowd control, limiting their numbers to 25% of total capacity. And if they need help, I hope they reach out to us and with enough time that we can pull some people together to help them if they need assistance with making that work. So anything else, Kent? Okay. So HDI always put together a flyer of events, and I'm wondering if maybe just a flyer that we could have a few in all of the businesses that people could pick up, so that, you know, the first business they walk into, they'd be able to say, oh, we've got this business here, a small map, something that directs people and gives them an idea of where they can, you know, where the shopping is, where the restaurants are that they can get takeout. I don't know.
HDI was going to do a touch-free program this year,
okay.
But because everything has been canceled, we've stopped production on anything. I can see if we can post something on our website, and that's something though that hopefully Katie can pick up on now, and not to overload her on her first week or so on the job, but you know, I see her more as a marketing person, not just an events person for the town. So that might be something, you know, but still recognizing that, you know, there might be signs up. I think that's a great idea. People can see signs in the store windows and maybe a map, but not something that they're actually
Okay.
physically taking. And then we can share that information, of course, with the visitor center, you know, because people obviously always stop there first, and you know, and so that they know what our restrictions are in the county and why they're eating outside like they're at a ski resort.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Was that a hand raise, Paul?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Lynette.
It almost looked like you raised your hand, but I wasn't sure.
Oh, no.
Okay, all right. Well,
I move to adjourn.
is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Happy
Any
Thanksgiving,
opposed?
everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you all so much.
Good night,
Take
John.
care. Be safe.
Hi, Mary. See you, Keith.
Hope you feel better.
Feel better, Ken.
Yep.
See you, Lynette.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.